Hi everyone, and welcome to this short webinar that we'll have for you today. I'm going to start right away and not wait the sort of usual couple of minutes. So I hope everyone's ready. Today we are going to talk about getting the most out of Writeback. We will focus on things around multiple users and collaboration sort of use cases in Writeback, since that's where we get the most questions and where we feel that many customers need a little bit of help and a bit of better understanding. Feel free to ask any questions around these products in the Q&A section at the bottom. If we don't have time to get to it today, we will definitely pick it up at a later stage. We usually do an extra webinar if needed, or we can pick up individually with people that want that as well, of course. Unfortunately, we do not have Al with us. He is in London on the Gartner event. He was supposed to attend from there and make like a bit of a cool impression from the Gartner event. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too loud, so we skipped Al and it's just me. I hope and think we will still be okay. So to put things in perspective, where are we at? What are we talking about? These are different product lines. We have the library, we have self-service, we have finance, Gantt, and collaboration. In collaboration, we have Writeback, input form, and teamwork. And then we also in finance have finance comments. So we're actually going to talk a little bit about that as well. But the main focus here is now on the collaboration product at the very right of that picture. So when it comes to Writeback extensions, you more or less have 4 different options in Vizlib. The first 2, pretty self-explanatory, a Writeback table and an input form, where the table obviously is more or less like a straight table, where you can input many rows at the same time. The input form is typically used for cases where you input one row at a time, more like surveys and forms and things that perhaps you want to look a little bit nicer, where you want to design around it and make sure that you can explain a little bit what you're asking about. Then we have teamwork, which is basically a chat within Qlik, where you can comment on individual objects or make comments on a sheet and talk about the different products. You can also insert images, you can set categories, you can do a lot of things with these comments. And then we have finance comments, which actually connect to an individual cell inside the the finance report. So the difference between these, one sort of bigger difference between them, is that for Writeback table and input form, the data is loaded to the Qlik data model. And by the way, a fair warning, we are going to get relatively technical today. So if you feel lost, ask questions. We'll see if we can answer them today, or we know to get back to you. So they load data. It requires a reload of the application, and we get the data back to Qlik. For teamwork and finance comments, the data is real time. It's connected to the data source, and it picks up the data from the data source in real time. As data is written down, we can pick up the new things from the database, and then we mix that or blend that with the data in the front end using the actual extension. So the extension pick up both the comment and the data from Qlik, and then it shows it for finance comments. It shows it in the cell, or for teamwork, it shows it in the commentary section next to the object or next to whatever objects you have on the sheet. So with that, I'm not going to dwell on sort of talking about a PowerPoint. I'm going to jump into what we call the VMC, the Vizlib Management Console. This is where the Vizlib server has all its settings. And we'll get back to talking about the server and serverless options for Writeback when we get nearer to the end of this session, because you kind of need a bit of background to understand when to use one or the other, and when it's even a real use case. But you'll need the background first. So that's why we're starting with the server and the different settings and things in the VMC around having multiple users. So in the VMC, we start by setting up an integration, which can be an integration to a database. Typically, something like Postgres or some sort of connection. Then based on that, we set up a destination, which is where we write the data back to. So if we look at this little connection here, we write data back to a QVD. Of course, we could have different types of databases that we write back to. If we want to write back to Snowflake, BigQuery, Oracle through REST, we can do that. This is what we call the destination. This destination now writes data back. And when we do that, we have something that we call auto-locking, which means that if two users try to write the data at the same time, they actually won't be able to because we won't allow them. And the reason for that is that it's not possible in Qlik Sense to have two apps reload at the same time. And the data model needs to be refreshed before any new data is added or updated. So if we didn't have the server to stop this from happening, we would end up in really bad situations with things colliding. And that's why it's automatically locked. We can also set this to manual locking. This allows for the user to say that, hey, I'm actually editing this now. So that locks it for other users and stops them from being able to change things in the writeback table. That can be really useful if you're about to do big changes or it's really important that it doesn't collide. Then you can sort of make those changes and then you can say, oh, now I'm done. And then you actually allow other people in. You can also use what we call lock groups. And a lock group allows you to put this in position also when you have multiple destinations. You might write back both to a REST API and to a QVD and perhaps even to a database as well. But you want to lock all those destinations when you're writing things into the table. So that's what we have a lock group for. And also, of course, if you have multiple applications that are somehow related, then you can lock those applications together through locking the destinations. So that is the main part of the locking feature. There's actually one more thing around locking that we should take a look at, and that's when we do inserts. So when we do inserts of data, not updates or overwrites, when we do inserts, then we have what we call a concurrency mode, which queues the different inputs. So we'll take a look a little bit at a demo here on inputting data. And when we input, we queue the different inputs. So if user 1 does an input, user 2 does it right afterwards, and then we want to reload. What actually happens is that the server waits with a reload until we've done the actual writes from those users. So that when we, after the reload, then we get all the new updated data from everyone that's been doing inputs lately, so to speak. So the default here is to queue it, and then does the writebacks, then it reloads after that. And then you still have the same settings around locking and manual locking. So that's an important part in trying to make sure that this works for everyone. Let's take a quick look at actually how this works for the inserts. So in this little app, we have what we call a soft delete. So of course you can update things in Writeback, but you can also insert and then allow the logic in the app to handle what should be shown. So here we have a price list with the current prices. The current prices might have changed over time, and we might want to keep track of that still. Excuse me. And by doing inserts, we can have the logic that just has the latest one here, and then everything here is where all the changes are. So if we change this and update it and write it back, we'll still only get the current price, but we'll still have this little log file here at the bottom that keep track of all the changes. This was now changed to 70. It used to be 59.99. The difference is this. This was done by Michael. So we have the history of all the transactions, but we're only showing the latest one. This is actually how we recommend you use this in most cases. Most of the time, it's useful to also keep track of all the changes that have been done. So that way insert is easier. Even if you're actually looking to update something, you do an insert, but you get only the updated data from the script. And by the way, this demo app is available so for downloads. You can download it and take a look at how we've done this. There is no mystery behind this, but there is a bit of script and a bit of logic that you need to understand. So it's available for download. The other option that we have is something that we call loop and reduce. So for apps that perhaps are a little bit bigger, or there's more of them and there's many users. So a normal use case could be that we have 20 different departments all running writebacks, and they're all doing it on a monthly basis. So everyone is more or less doing their writebacks at the same time. And we want to make sure that they're not colliding. We, of course, can handle that, as I just described, by doing inserts and other things. But at the same time, there might be so many uploads and reloads that it becomes difficult anyway. And another important aspect of this solution that I'm going to present now is that it will also make it faster, because if we can divide the app into 20 different parts, it makes it a lot easier to handle. If you used to work with QlikView back in the day and you had the QlikView publisher, you recognize this. It's the same type of feature that was there back in QlikView, where you could take an app, loop it, and reduce it. So you only maintain a main app, which has all the data and the layout and things like that, and then you just split it up into 20 different pieces depending on the data. That means that they get smaller, they get specific for that area. It's also a really nice way to do security because you don't have to handle too much of the section access bits, so it makes it easier, and it also makes it smaller and faster. So if we look at that, what we have here is we have a small task, which is called collaborative forecast, which is our demo, and then we just pick a number of values. So this app, what we do with this, we take the app and then we actually split it into 3 different apps. We loop through 100, 200, and 300, and we create 3 apps based on this. So, of course, you could add 20 or 200 here as well. It's just a matter of how long this takes. What's cool about that is that the only thing that updates on each reload is actually the end app. And then you can do a bigger reload and reload everything if you wanted to, but that's only really necessary if you update the design or the layout or the logic in the script. So that was loop and reduce. A couple of final things before we sort of leave today, because this is a really short webinar. When using things like teamwork and collaboration, so where we have like real-time updates. So if you look at collaboration, we have these nice little comments. They're still going to be in sequence. So think about, what do you actually need? Do you really need things to happen exactly at this moment in time, or are you okay with things happening in a sequence? Because even though this is real time, it's still in sequence. So it's something to consider which one is best for your use case. And one thing to know also about collaboration, you do have categories, we do have approval processes, and we do have things like images and exports in collaboration. Teamwork, which is a really nice one for being able to communicate directly in the app. So that's one thing. The other thing that we should discuss, which I mentioned at the beginning, is server versus serverless. So I hear a lot of people saying that, oh, this sounds like a hassle. Why do we need a server? It sounds like a lot of work. And it is going to be a bit of work, because we need to set it up properly. We need to connect it to the right security. But then what's the reason for not running serverless, not using a server? Well, we would run into quite a number of limitations when we put it into production. It would be perfectly fine to do serverless for smaller demos or showcases, but once you get into production, you want to make sure that it's secure, you want to make sure that people have the right access, and then it's going to get tricky. So for serverless, what we could do, we could actually use it if we have like one user and they're using one single app. Works perfectly fine. If we have, or separate users, where we maybe have 5 separate users working on completely separate data. The other thing that also is required then is that they have to, if you're running serverless, you have to have a professional license. If you have the server, you can definitely use just an analyzer license. But if you're running serverless, you would need a professional license. And this goes for just about everything that you would do. The only way to get around it would be fairly ugly solutions on working with variables and things that doesn't really end up in a good way. And the third thing is that you need to give users access to all the data sources that are used by the app and access to execute or reload. To me, that security bit is probably the main issue, that we can't really create proper security without having a real server in the solution. So, assuming that we can sort of get rid of the cost problem of licensing, then I would say that the security bit is usually the biggest problem with not having a server, and the concurrency bits that we just discussed, that it's not possible to run multiple reloads at the same time in Qlik. So they would have to be separate for that to work. I'm going to take a quick look at the questions. We're already running over, but I'm going to take a quick look at the questions, see if there's anything. And yes, we will provide the link to download the app. There will be a follow-up email where we will send out links, and we will also have the link to the app. So that will definitely be there. And yes, then there will also be a question. There will also be a recording sent out. Yeah, the rest of these things I think that we can get back to, but we'll summarize all these questions. We might answer some of them already in the response email if there's something really easy. Otherwise, we might have a follow-up. And I hope this was useful. Just finish off, and if you want more information from us, I would recommend taking a look at our upcoming events. So if you happen to be in London or Amsterdam, in London on May 25th or in Amsterdam on May 31st, please do visit us. It would be great to see you all in person. And that's it from me today. Thank you very much.